Hi, we're Oxygen Conservation, and this is the Shoe Room Sessions. Bevis, welcome back to the Shoot Room.
Nice to be here again.
I think you might be the illustrious first two-time non-team member guest, so congratulations.
Yeah, I don't believe that, but I'll take it. So, okay.
What's changed with you since last time you were in the Shoot Room?
Oh, crikey, what's changed with us? I think the bank's done even more lending on rewilding and nature-based solutions, building off the success we had with you guys. Yeah, it's much bigger. Personally, I've settled into a house in East Devon, which I'm
super exciting.
It's been an eco home with solar panels and air source heat pump and so on, which has been a great experience. Lots changed.
Excellent. And the next chapter for you, so we're recording this at the end of 2024 and you've got a big 2025?
Well, we've announced that during my 10th year, I'll step down as Chief Executive of Triodos Bank UK mid-2025 at the half year. So the search is well underway to find my successor. And it's I'm very I think committed and enthusiastic to good corporate governance. Good corporate governance organisations need change. So it's a good time for the bank with a very strong and stable management team and a good time for me. So, yeah.
I think it's really amazing. It's such a sense of self-awareness and thinking about the sort of greater good of the bank and everyone there. It's just looking at it from the outside, I think just abject class in terms of the way you've handled that process. So bravo. Really well done. If we project ahead to whenever your last time with the bank is, what are you most looking forward to in summer, autumn next year?
Having
Yeah. The next adventure.
Oh, well, to be honest, I'm looking forward to some sort of, not decontamination, but kind of some erasure. Because if you're so inside something, and anyone that's worked with me, not just at the bank, but before, knows I'm a kind of 120% person, you know. So I'm looking forward to just a bit of space to explore what's next, not feeling I have to answer it immediately. But it'll be nice if I can manage to stop in the summer to spend a bit of time in a sea kayak, bobbing around off the coast of Devon and just spending a bit more time in nature.
Magical.
Yeah.
We've asked you to come back because you have very kindly, you and the bank, offered to sponsor my first book that's being released next year.
Yeah.
Why on earth are you happy to do that with us?
Well, crikey. I mean, if we rewind from the book, I think the loan that we've done together has been quite high profile and groundbreaking, partly because of the size of it. And we've talked about previously that, £20 million plus loan is the kind of quantum that wakes the wider financial sector up to say, actually, this is emerging. It's some kind of nature-based solutions are emerging as a new asset class and a new type of, lending and opportunity for the financial sector. So I think partly we wanted to sponsor the book to help get the message out there because it's very important that you, I think, scale what you do, that you get more profile off it, but also others learn from it. And so we, having understood what you were trying to do, I think the book shines a light on a lot of the dilemmas that face rewilding projects, nature-based solutions, alternative forms of farming, and so on, whether that's the community aspects or, arguments around food security and everything else. And the book lays some of those bare and your own experience of those and your own thoughts on them. So that's a big part of it, really. I think we wanted to get behind you and try and do more. I mean, we're also very keen to do more as a bank ourselves and lend more money and support more projects for our corporate finance function as well in nature-based solutions and rewilding farm projects. So hopefully there's a bit of mutuality in getting the message out there and getting the learning out there.
I'm obviously super grateful, but super proud of the collaboration we've had from first contact with your teams and onwards, and it continues, as you say, the focus and the amplification it's given to the sector. I keynoted a sustainable finance conference recently, and some of your team were in the room, and I brought up the loan deal, and there was a round of applause, like literally across the room, for the bravery and the ambition that your team had put into doing that with us. And it's really great, the sort of traction and how much that's inspired other people to try and do the same.
It's nice to hear that, because I hadn't heard that.
Oh, did not reach you? No, so Simon and Laura were in the room, and it got.
Okay. Well, I hope they felt the reflected glory of that, because I mean we have had to innovate. I mean, what we've done with you, and we've done a range of nature-based solutions, loans and projects now. So, but you have to innovate. You can't think conventionally that you're just going to lend money against an asset with a proven revenue stream. That asset's got, the loan's got a standard amortization. We've had to be quite flexible in every single project we've looked at in the nature-based solution sector. If you imagine the annual income of a project, the bar graph's got lots of different colours in it, and none of the bars are the same in any project. The proportion of the colours shifts hugely. So with you guys, a large part of the income is off the back of carbon credits. We're very concerned those are very credible, as are you, that they're issued under the appropriate codes. They command a credible value and so on. But part of our loan with you is geared around sort of repayments off the back of those being realised, bullet payments being allowed, and so on. So this is very non-standard stuff, and we've had to be quite creative across a number of projects we financed in that way. And that's challenging for mainstream banks and financial institutions to think in that way. It kind of conflicts with the financial model a little bit as well, but if people really want to get behind the commitments they're making on net zero and having sort of deeper awareness of biodiversity impacts in their portfolios and so on, then these are the kind of models they're going to have to understand and adopt.
It speaks to the genesis of why we felt the need for the book in the first place, really. So the co-creativity, the collaboration that's been required to make the financing arrangement you've helped us with possible every step of the way. Every conversation, collaboration, compromise, how do we find a way to work? And that's our spirit across the entire sector. So I love our moniker of scale conservation, because it's not scale oxygen conservation, it's scale the entire sector. And lots of people are now interested in and passionate about natural capital and building a nature-based economy, but few are living the realities of that day to day. And that was the genesis of the first book, to share our experiences, our successes, our failures, our learnings, the contradictions and the compromises we have to live every day. So hopefully it makes it a little easier for the next people that come along. And that's really the genesis of what's been book one with us.
Yeah, I think it achieves that. I mean, to manage, it's not a manual as to how we're going to do it. It is sharing lived experience. And as I said, those dilemmas, I think it's quite interesting how much you major on sort of the human aspects as well of the organisation, the talent, the kind of people you want and need, and how you hire them and everything else. So there'll be some things I think that will surprise people who engage with the book, who might be thinking this is just a story about, challenges we had engaging with the community, or challenges buying the land, or challenges negotiating on certain aspects. So it's partly a story of oxygen conservation, but there's a lot of insight in that as to how do you scale things successfully and differently with different mindsets as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. It's the world of publishing a book's not new to you. You've had your own experiences.
It's still relatively new. Yeah. Well, I published a book, I think, when was it now? 2 or 3 years ago now, called River Journey: Searching for Wild Beavers and Finding Freedom. Because earlier in my career, I was chief executive of the Avon Wildlife Trust, and at the back end of the sort of pandemic in 2021, if you can remember those sort of days, we were still in sort of partial lockdowns in the spring, and so on. So I wanted to take some time off, but had no plan. And former colleagues said, "Well, we've heard reports of a beaver on the Avon. Could you get out in your kayak and see what's going on?" And that turned into a bit of an addiction and months of trying to work out what the hell was going on. Because the second I got on the river, you could see chewed trees and stripped bark and everything else. So I was laying camera traps for months and getting up at dawn. Getting up way before dawn to be on the river at dawn. Getting up at 4:30 in the morning for pleasure. And ultimately, I managed to prove there was a whole breeding family of 7 beavers in one lodge, and that they'd been there for some time, and there were 3 generations of beaver on this river in a peri-urban environment very near Bath, where nobody had really understood they were. Obviously, I'm sure some beaver bombers and people involved in releases knew they were there, but it hadn't, for years, it had not penetrated the public consciousness that they were there. So I wrote a book that's partly around that adventure and sharing it, and huge positive impact had on me. So it's a story of nature and well-being. It's partly, front and center a story about beavers and what I managed to prove, and the madness of the sort of delays we've had in all sorts of conservation regulation being changed and shifted to allow for rewilding and species reintroduction. And there's also then a lot of reflections from 25 years plus working in sustainability and how we could speed things up. But it's a nice sort of bookended story, because when we told people that those beavers were there, we managed the sort of press around that very carefully. It made the national news, and it made Boris Johnson's conference speech. I don't know if you remember, but he used the phrase "build back beaver."
Yeah.
And so it's a whole nice bookended story around that period as well. So yeah.
Have you always written, like putting pen to paper to process your thoughts, or what's your why to write, and what's your process?
Well, I mean, yeah, always is a big phrase. I had a keen interest in it when I was younger, and I think I lost that. And the book came about because I was writing reports of the beavers and typing them up for the Wildlife
I love
Trust.
this.
What I was finding, where I was finding it, taking some GPS readings and different things. So, and through all of that kind of got reawakened. I was starting to storytell more than report write, and then once we made the news public, I could see this, as I say, this nice story of beginning to end, and the Prime Minister at the time talking about it and everything else. So, but yeah, I have always been a big fan of journaling. And actually one of the things that kept me sane running a bank through the pandemic was to keep a sort of book of positivity, and just sort of stand still and reflect occasionally about what are the really positive things that, have happened this week and everything.
Do you do that? Is that something you do weekly, or just when you feel the...
Well, at that time I was doing it weekly, and just taking a conscious moment to sit down with a hot drink in a comfy chair and just do some positive sort of journaling and thinking. It's not something I've kept up. I probably stopped it after about a year and a bit. But
hot drink in a comfy chair might be the new tagline on the podcast. I think that could work. It's really interesting, the why. So I came late to language. So I was always a numbers guy when I was growing up through school. I was in the top sets at maths and science, but really struggled with language. Foreign languages just cannot pick up. And English, I was very much a late developer. I looked through A-levels and purely got a first in my degree because my memory was good and I could recite back what I'd been told. And it wasn't until, again, luck is such a big part of life, but looked into a PhD because I was the only person that got a first in the year, and they gave me an opportunity to stay on. But it was that process of repeatedly being beaten with the PhD, because it keeps coming back.
Yeah.
Like every other thing you write in your life you can put away, but that is not coming back and not finishing until it's perfect.
Yeah.
And that was the really thing that changed it for me. And then post PhD was really when a love of reading presented itself, and it was reading about the business world and sport that I could apply to something. In the absence of being able to apply it, reading wasn't something that worked for me. But as soon as it did, so I still don't read fiction at all. But sports books, autobiographies, high performance things, business books, I adore and consume a lot now. And that was really the genesis. And then didn't set out to write a book at all, but did, after we'd visited an estate or after something meaningful had happened at OC, would start writing as a way of quieting my mind and focusing on a topic. Because when I think about something new, I think people's brainwaves work in different ways. Some people think in like long form, curvy thoughts and have every bit of it thought out before they express it. Whereas if you give me an idea, my brain goes off like a firework in 15 different directions, and I have to decide which one to follow. And based on writing, I'm forced to focus on what that idea is and explore it. And by working on that and nuancing it and sharing it around, it helped us really understand a lot of our positions on things.
Yeah.
And one thing I liked about the book is, so we wrote it through the first 18 months of sort of OC, and then I went back and revisited those thoughts to see how my opinions had changed over time.
Yeah.
And there's a real one around deer management. So I remember coming into the sector, not knowing a huge amount about stalking and deer management and the realities of what that looked like, having a perception of how it would be viewed by local communities, doing a whole 180 on that, thinking when I returned to the article that I was going to feel differently, but actually being back where I started again throughout that whole process. So it's been a real journey of discovery of the realities of how different the country is in different places, and the challenges and the joys and the whirlwind experience that's been OC.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting outcome of the book, though, is that reflective piece, because you write about a particular theme. You know, the book's structured in chapters by theme of different things, and then you'll pull it out and give your April 24 reflection on what you'd written sort of 18 months before.
It was quite scary to do because some of them I couldn't remember what I was going to go back.
But it's an interesting, unusual format because I'm a natural perfectionist, which I know my colleagues will find hard to believe. But I think most people would write a book trying to, you know, nail it down and say, well, where am I now in this moment? And I think that's quite powerful the way you've done it, because it does show this is a learning exercise. And you talk about growth mindset in the book. This is all about being open and curious as to, you know, what you've got right, what you learn from the next project. And I think anybody who's trying to do similar things on nature-based solutions needs to absolutely go into it with that mindset.
I didn't have that early in my career. You know, I very much
A growth mindset.
Yeah, I think I was more. I feared failure in every which way.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
And it's so growing up in the north, rough childhood, not very well off at all, big chip on my shoulder. What would be described now as like a toxic masculine environment. It was don't speak, hit first, don't ask questions, pub on a Friday night, factory during the week, don't have aspirations. And, you know, the leadership role models there were, these are the like action heroes of the 80s and 90s, the Sylvester Stallones and Arnolds. That's what a man was that you were told to be. And so I went into academia and sort of PhD that way. And PhD being a very combative educational environment didn't help that either, because it meant you were arguing about a topic but very forcefully. And it wasn't until team sports, meeting my wife, and actually the lessons I learned in working in the business and teams in that way, and lessons my team teach me to this day about collaboration and compromise, and probably early 30s to now, so I'm 41 now. The last 10 or 11 years I've really learned success is achieved in sharing, collaborating, elevating others. As a child, you were taught it was achieved in pushing people back so that you could be forward. And yeah, that being open to learning and viewing the realization and the change of opinion as a wonderful thing rather than a failing of being wrong in the first place took some time to get to.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think that's a journey for everyone. Actually, very different journeys. But when I finished up at university, my father had passed away during that time. And when I left university, I really had to sort of live hand to mouth and start from scratch, and you know there wasn't any financial sort of support in the background. So I totally recognise that same driven journey of where you're just trying to build a shelter over yourself and make sure you've got, you know, accommodation and food and everything else. But I think I had a different experience because I also did a PhD, but I had a very nurturing supervisor, brilliant. A woman who was a mathematician, and her PhD actually was modelling the airflow around a car called Thrust SSC, which was the world land speed record car. So she'd been doing all the sort of modelling of airflows for her own PhD, and then, you know, years and years later supervised mine. So I started out in sustainability by you know, basically being taught and studying pollution monitoring and modelling. That was kind of what environmental management meant in the mid-1990s. That's what it was. It's much more progressive now. We're in a completely different world, really. But I learned a lot from her about, she was incredibly humble. Whilst she'd done this world-leading research, incredibly humble, very nurturing, very sort of positive. And I was lucky enough to find that later in my career as well with Ross Kidman-Cox, who was chair of Avon Wildlife Trust when I was chief exec, of, you know, very humble but incredibly nurturing sort of person. So I totally recognise I was a very different person 20 odd years ago, and have tried to then learn from those kind of people and others about how you sort of, allow space for others, foster brilliance, but also don't be afraid to show vulnerability and have a growth mindset yourself as well.
Yeah, that was probably one of my hardest leadership changes, because I was always of a view that, no, you, in a leadership role, you're in front of everything, everything's perfect, you cannot make a mistake, you cannot show. And then slowly over time, it's like the more vulnerability and honest you are about things, the more authentic it makes you, and actually it makes you a better leader. So there's a shout for everyone out there. If you're in leadership roles, share a little bit more than you're comfortable with and be a bit more open about it.
Yeah, I think part of leadership is just recognising where your comfort boundaries are and pushing beyond them generally. And that, you're not moving the organisation forward if you don't feel a little bit sense of unease. So yeah.
I think that's my feel on transparency as well. So some people say, well, you're building a business in a really competitive startup environment. The natural capital sector is growing quickly. Why on earth would you share the things that make you a brilliant team? And it's because we want others to push us ahead. We want that. I'm just going to be sharing a piece about how it's about collaboration, not competition. But actually, that probably you should have read. It's about both. It's about collaboration to drive competition, but in a healthy way of we all make each other better and push on. There's not going to be a sector if one company is fantastic and the others are lagging behind. Really need to get out there. There was a really, really exciting announcement from you guys collectively in the last few weeks that by 2030, you're going to intend to have routed £500 million into everything natural capital. Wow. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, 500 million by 2030 is a huge sort of number for us because we've been plugging away trying to make nature-based solutions happen in the UK since 2017. And by the end of 2024, we'd have deployed sort of between 40 to 50 million, somewhere in the middle of that on nature-based solutions. And that 500 million is kind of Europe-wide across our whole business.
Don't worry, I'm not assuming I'm getting it all. It's fine.
We do have single debtor limits, they're called, from a risk perspective, how much any one entity can have. But we would like to lend you a lot more. So
very kind.
We're working hard to find ways to do that and lead that for you. Yeah, I mean, that's the commitment we've made. It'll be a very significant proportion of our overall balance sheet. It's essential, though. I mean, we're doing it because we recognise the biodiversity crisis, and that has to be reversed and everything else. It's also central to net zero commitments, and increasingly, what we're seeing is it's going to be central to climate change resilience. It's here. The climate crisis is here. Probably the most people who are connected to this podcast and take time to watch it will realise that. And we have to really look at resilience and what we're doing to protect economies and livelihoods and lives. And nature-based solutions are an enormous part of that. On many levels. So there's a multitude of reasons to do it, and hopefully we've been at the forefront of this movement. We've completed transactions in Spain and other in the Netherlands, and looking them across all the countries we work in as well. So and we've also committed to also try and understand in detail the biodiversity impacts of our wider portfolio, because obviously we are pioneering nature-based investments, but we've also got a huge portfolio in the built environment, from care homes to schools to everything there. We've got organic farming interests, fair trade interests, a whole range of things, and renewable energy projects. So really trying to understand the biodiversity impacts of our whole portfolio is a commitment we've made, alongside saying we're going to put a lot of money in. The only thing I'd say, though, that in terms of what the UK needs and the world needs, the DEFRA and the Green Finance Institute sort of estimates are needing 500 million a year of commercial private sector finance into nature recovery by 2027, and $1 billion per year by 2030. And where we stand sort of now, back end of 2024, going into 2025, we've done, as I say, 40 to 50 million over the last 2 years. And I'm not aware of many people doing anything else of the same quantum. So the gear change is huge. And we're only going to get there with quite a different, more concerted and joined up approach, from a policy aspect, but also in a catalytic way. The early part of my career, I worked in the development of the recycling industry. And I think we need some similar approaches, frankly. We need to have some market development intervention. Yeah.
So outside of the work with us, which we've touched upon, which are the sort of nature-based, natural capital-based projects do you want to give a shout out to that you're really proud that you've been involved with?
Well, I'm very proud of the Triodos team, is the first thing I want to say, because we spent many years doing hard graft, and you've had to kiss a lot of frogs in this sector, really, to find the
good ecological-based reference.
Exactly. To find the projects that will really turn into princes and investments you can stand by and say we're really proud of that. And we're really proud of all the ones we've done. I think our corporate finance team was the kind of spearhead, because initially we had to do things off the bank's balance sheet. It wasn't initially going to be suitable for senior debt, as we were proving a new sector. And they did a bond issuance for Trees for Life in Scotland, which was to help them build what will be the first sort of rewilding education and conference centre and plant a whole load more trees and further their rewilding activities. But it was the first application of a charity bond used for a rewilding organisation. They also were the team behind sort of structuring and raising the money for the Wire catchment natural flood management project. And that one excites me over all others because that's really scalable. And it's the idea that multiple beneficiaries, flood agencies, local authority, water companies,
insurance companies, landowners,
exactly,
property owners, everybody.
Yeah, but they all put money into a vehicle to disperse payments to farmers for change of land use over a 10, 15-year period or whatever. And so that's really scalable. It's a way to kind of pump prime investment in nature up front. And that was, on a relatively small scale with only 19 landowners on the sort of supply side of the land use changes. But that excites me hugely. And then latterly...
Well, at 19, so you say on a small scale, which is, again, classic, you're very humble and modest. Anyone who's had to deal with 19 landowners will appreciate that's incredibly challenging.
Yeah, it's not simple. But if you look at bigger catchments, you're looking at that, way higher than that.
Dealing with a 7, for example.
That complexity. Yeah. But and I suppose we're also very proud of more recently Avon Needs Trees, which is a loan again to a charity, an NGO, but it's just south of Bristol, and we've helped them acquire 422 acres of farmland there for reforesting. But it's the largest sort of project, as we believe today in the UK, that's financed off the back of biodiversity net gain. So we provided them nearly £4 million towards that acquisition. But as I was talking about sort of, bar graphs and all the projects being different earlier and so on, this one, the principal source will be biodiversity net gain with some ecotourism. So that's why I'm proud of the team, because they're all completely different. They're different vehicles. One's a charity bond, one's a sort of a bond issued to sort of high net worths and foundations for a high risk concept in the Wire. Another's senior debt from us into Avon Needs Trees. So that's why I'm proud of them, partly because of how the team have innovated and structured them all, but they're all quite groundbreaking in their own different ways, and they're all replicable.
Market making as well. They're fundamental elements that you're bringing clarity, credibility, oversight, governance, helping to build a pillar that will make a market. They're all so interlinked, uniquely independent, but interlinked and important.
Yeah, and I mean, on that market making, I mean, that's partly what I've seen our role is. The bank's strapline is finance, change finance. So we've always seen ourselves as being there to try and do really pioneering things. That's our mission, and then set an example in doing that. But these are all replicable. So the models now, and there's ones beyond that we've helped bring to fruition. Those are replicable. So I'd love to see government entities, green finance, other organisations really get behind them and say, okay, how do we replicate this? Local nature partnerships as well. How can we learn from those models and apply them where they are? However, that we probably, to growth mindset, as we were talking about earlier, we probably still haven't discovered all the models and all the ways that, whether it's rewilding or natural flood management, we haven't discovered all the ways they can work and be financed. Yeah, we'll keep on that journey and keep discovering. But for that to happen effectively, we do need some market making. And, to my mind, I think we need a central body in the UK that will just look at standard contracts. We'll look at standard methodologies for measuring ecosystem services. We'll look at new carbon codes beyond peatland, woodland, the ones we've got, etc. We probably are going to need one for some seabed restoration and different types of carbon code and so on. And I think it's somebody sort of kind of described it as a sort of noisy bazaar to me the other day, the nature finance sector, and it is, and it needs more clarity and simplification, I think, because we could accelerate this much more to really fulfill that ambition of 500 million a year of private sector finance in 2 years' time, 1 billion in 5 years' time. We're a long, long way off that.
I sent an article titled "The Noisy Bazaar Coming." Is that a government body? Is it a private sector led? Is it a collaboration? Do you ever feel for what that might look like?
Well, all I can say is I think there are templates for it because, I was one of the first people to be employed by an organisation called RAP, the Waste and Resources Action Programme, which started off as an NGO guaranteed by government, floated off to be a charity years later, and is now a world-leading circular economy organisation. The Carbon Trust was set up at the same time to do similar work for low carbon. I think it needs a central sort of commitment from government with some funding that might leverage in some private sector funding, but it needs to be neutral. So, I think it needs either ownership from an existing body or the creation of a new one to do that really effectively, because we need that. It needs real authenticity and integrity to the kind of decisions, and it needs to, as RAP did in the recycling sector many, many years ago, it needs to broker all the conversations about standards and the way the market should evolve.
When you reflect on your 10 years at the helm, what comes to mind as the proudest moments or the happiest days?
Well, that's really hard to answer because, what I took on, I'd worked for the bank previously in my career as well. So, I knew what I was going into and had a sense and a vision for it. I took on what was a kind of a postal telephone internet savings bank. And now today offers full service current accounts, broader range of investments products, first bank in the UK to have an investment crowdfunding platform. So we've just broadened the bank and it's twice the size it was now. So I could pick so many moments within that. I suppose the two things that stand out for me are the things where we've really been true to what we're there to do in financing innovation. So if I put aside nature-based solutions as an obvious passion and personal sort of mission and so on, the first major rollout of electric vehicle charging points to supermarket car parks in the UK was financed by us. The first all-electric intercity coach service in the UK. We've just financed in the last year what will be a national first, a dedicated centre for children with disabilities and their families to go to just to have play and safe environment to be together. It sounds a sensible thing, but if you have very high levels of physical disability, just to be able to play and have access to the right facilities doesn't exist. So there's a whole load of national firsts that we've done that I'm immensely proud of and the team are proud of. But we've kind of grown a bank, we've financed a lot of firsts, we've continued to challenge the finance sector. There's a big body of work that's kind of saying, look, guys, we haven't got this right. The finance sector just is kind of tweaking around the edges. But the thing I'm most proud of is the culture of the organisation, because I've always felt I'm walking on the shoulders of giants, of the people that set the organisation up and people who worked for it for 20 plus years in building it. So I think we've deepened the kind of a very, very sort of people-focused culture. And I think when people phone Triodos, they get a sense of it on the phone, and I think that's really hard to do. And you touch on it a lot in your book, that cultural element. And I think doing really visionary, pioneering things is about people.
You're a beautiful person, Bevis. When you look back in 10 years' time, what do you hope Triodos will be doing then, 10 years into the future, and you look back? What do you hope they'll have achieved?
Oh, well, I need to be careful because I don't want to put a millstone around my successor's neck as somebody else's great privilege to sort of set the direction and the tone. And obviously that's got to be done working hand in glove with European colleagues, because we've, trying to scale a bank across 5 countries and more broadly as well. I hope they continue to scale, because we've taken it from a small bank to a kind of mid-sized bank, and it needs to go bigger again, so it will be even stronger commercially. Because if it is, you have more choice. The more people have always seen these things as a kind of a dichotomy, really. Can you really be a sustainable, ethical bank and be profitable and everything else? Actually, for me, the more commercially successful the bank is, the more flexibility you've got to invest in the next nature-based solutions and take more risk on your balance sheet. So I really hope my successor's able to scale the thing and really continue to play with that dynamic and evolve the bank. But I think the team will know I'll continue to be a supportive and noisy champion of the bank and the need to change banking and do finance differently, whatever I'm doing next. Yeah.
Wonderful. So our time is unfortunately coming close to an end. My favourite last question is, what question haven't I asked you that you wish I had?
Good. I'm not sure there's anything that I sat here today feeling I had to get out. I very much enjoyed the conversation. You didn't ask me if I was going to buy your book. And even though I have read it, I am going to buy the book when it comes out, and I'm sure I will gift it to several people as well. So I hope it goes well, and thanks for having me, and I hope oxygen conservation continues to scale and a lot of people learn from your example and from the book.
I'm truly humbled by your kindness and support, and for you and the bank bringing the book to a wider audience. Thank you for believing in us, and thank you for believing in me. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Look forward to continuing to work together.